Okay, let's start with some introduction. I want everybody to go around with their names, pronouns, what school they go to, and one word that describes the school to prison pipeline in your own words.
My name is Shalik Hollis, pronouns he, him. I graduated from Randolph Technical Career Academy. One word to describe the school to prison pipeline, corrupt.
Unfair.
Humiliating.
It's intentional.
Unjust.
It's destructive.
The school-to-prison pipeline, also known as the schoolhouse-to-jailhouse track, is the disproportionate tendency of minors and young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds to become incarcerated due to increasingly harsh school and municipal policies. In the 2013 to 2014 school year, facing a $304 million budget cut, the Philadelphia School District closed 23 schools and fired thousands of teachers, aides, and counselors in the remaining schools. Due to city budget cuts, the relationship between students and faculty suffered immensely, causing students to feel isolated and disposable when in learning environments. Here are their stories.
Teachers, they'll notice you if you're a star student or if you have good behavior that's consistent. And if you're anything outside of that, then they're not on your side, and then they're actively hindering you, and they kind of ignore you.
The school that I've left a while back, there would be students that would need that attention and guidance, but the teachers would see that as something that they're not going to waste their time on because they just don't have faith in that student.
The agenda is to get people to the top, the most profitable, the people that look like they'll have futures, to college, to the top, and anyone else that left for scraps,
As students act out in response to a growing lack of support in underfunded schools, zero-tolerance policies arise that push students out of the classrooms that were made to serve them.
The day-to-day life for school for me is walking into the school, being searched by hand and with metal detectors. Always having the staff make comments and everything to the students and everything, but we just have to disregard them.
Currently, there is $28.9 million in the Philadelphia school operating budget for school police and security services.
We have a very strict uniform policy. We have to wear ties and blazers. There's no food drinks from the outdoors. We have to walk through metal detectors. There was an incident where I had my afro and I would shape it with using bobby pins. And when I walked through the metal detector, they would beep. And I told my school police officer that they were the bobby pins. And the first few times, they let me go through. And then one day, when the principal was standing in front of them, they made a whole big deal about it. And I ultimately got a phone call home, and they were going to take steps to make it a suspension.
Black girls are 6 times as likely to be suspended as white girls. Black boys are 3 times as likely to be suspended as white boys.
It was one time I was in the back hallway, and I think I was going to my locker, and I think somebody broke the vending machine. Although I was around there at that time, I left. I was I don't want to be around. And I think around that time, they seen us on had us on the camera, and we had got fined with it, and he was like, "You're lucky you're not getting arrested." I'm like, why would I be getting arrested if I didn't do anything?
Due to the growing presence of policing in schools, the number of violent encounters between students and police continues to rise at every level of education.
In my 3rd grade year, I was dealing with a lot at home, and I would often have tantrums over small things. And one day I had a tantrum in my science class. I had a tantrum in his classroom. I don't remember over what, but it got really out of hand, and the school police officers were called, and they escorted me out in handcuffs, and I'm squirming around trying to get loose and stuff. For me to be in 3rd grade and for them to think that it's okay to put a 3rd grader in handcuffs, I felt like that was just very inappropriate. After that moment, I felt hopeless. I felt they see me as a bad person, so why try to change? They're just going to constantly see me as that.
Black girls are only 16% of the girls enrolled in K-12 schools, but 45% of the girls suspended from school.
Beginning of sophomore year, I was in a very bad place, very, very depressed, very anxious, very suicidal.
After a mental health incident at school, administrators called the police.
And without calling my parents, they brought in actual policemen to handcuff me and escort me out of the building. I was terrified. I was shaking. I'd never been in like a situation like that, and all through this year, my first year of high school, all this was happening. And I was still crying. I begged them to let me go. I begged them, where was I going, what was happening, but they gave me no answers.
For me, being a young person, when I was younger, going to school and, you know, from home, I'm at home and the cops are like abusing me. They're harassing me. They're targeting me. They're stopping me. And then I go to school and see a cop and they're doing the same thing. How does that help me get my education? They shouldn't be present. We don't need police. What we need more people from the community in our schools. We need social workers in our school. We need counselors in our schools. We need less police in our schools.
With policies that make simple acts grounds for extended suspension, students like Dayani Cook quickly build up records that make it less likely for them to receive support in their schools.
One day when I went to school, and the same day I was being antagonized, so when I went, you know, I got into a fight with somebody and I sat quiet the entire period while, you know, they harassed me, called me names, threatened me the entire period while the staff sat there and watched it go on while I sat there and stayed silent. And when the period ended, we both got up and we started fighting. And we both went home suspended. But when I went home, I talked to my mom about it and everything. But she understood where I was coming from, because when you're in a situation where you don't, like, I didn't egg the situation on to say. I didn't have any input in the situation, but I still ended up getting into a fight. And the staff stood around and watched it happen.
I believe I was more angry and truly a sense of feeling lost. You try to talk to your child, ask them what's going on, what's wrong. It then made me feel as though I had no type of control over my own house. So constantly going back and forth up into the schools, I felt frustrated because I felt like the school and the system, including the school district, would not help me. And the people inside in particular school, I went to the principal, I went to the vice principal, I went to the counselor on several occasions. I also went to the climate control people and the school police asking for assistance so many different times, and these people did not do anything. They didn't help. I called the school district asking, can I have my son removed out the school? They kept referring me back to the school that was then basically giving me blocking points. The in particular vice principal and principal told me directly that, see if your son will go to school for a couple of months and then we'll try to give him a referral to get placed into a different school. But the process truly is that if a parent feels as though the child is being harassed under any terms, if you request your child to be moved from that school, you're supposed to have the option of picking another school within the school district, even if it is not in your neighborhood school.
Dayani was placed in an alternative school where he felt the conditions weren't any better than previous ones, if not worse.
It was way more violent. And then honestly, it wasn't clean. Like, the place wasn't as clean as a normal school. The food was horrible. They gave us tiny portions. I don't feel as though anybody should be placed in this environment if they want them to thrive. But this is way more like a prison than any other school I've ever been to. In court, you feel like you're on trial for murder. You feel as though you feel the pressure of everybody in the room staring at you, reading every last thing you've done without knowing who you are, judging you. They could care less about anything you're doing or you trying to better yourself. All they care about is anything written down on a paper.
Most students that are funneled through the criminal justice system, I think that they react to it and respond to it in a negative way. I mean, most of the times that they get out there displaced, it's hard for them to get employment, it's hard for them to reconnect with their families.
I think it begins the psychological process of treating them like adults when emotionally and developmentally they're not there just yet. Even when they're 18, doesn't necessarily mean that they are a fully developed adult that can understand exactly what's happening to them or really get at the root at some of their behavior.
You have a lot of people that don't understand the experiences of the people that they're judging, and they automatically assume that they're guilty. And this whole system, that's how they operate. You know, we work with young people that have bails higher than adults in the criminal justice system, way higher for the same exact crime.
The whole city and the school system treat some of the most drastic effects of poverty like a crime.
The school to prison pipeline is not interested really in restoring harm or restoring or working through conflict. It defines justice as something bad happened, so something bad has to also happen to that person who made something bad happen. It's very cyclical. It's very much based on punishment. And that doesn't actually sort of help people to grow.
And what schools expect of young people plays a huge role in whether young people have a future. That's one of the most critical elements of the school to prison pipeline. Like, how we're treating them is a indicator of how we our respect for them and like what we think they're capable of doing. And so like if we're treating kids like they're prisoners, then that represents our expectations of them.
We need to really figure out how we can create systems that heal both people that are involved in the case.
So what are some solutions? How do we interrupt the school to prison pipeline?
Instead of people getting suspended for probably having outbursts in class, why not talk to that person? Like, what happened? What made you have that outburst? What's going on at home? Some people might not feel comfortable speaking on what's going on at home, but just talking about what was on their mind at that point can help a lot more than just, oh no, you're suspended.
I am saying that staff should interact with students more, especially students who need help mentally, because how can you expect someone to perform if they're hurting? You wouldn't send an athlete on the field with a sprained ankle.
In addition to prioritizing mental health and emotional support, many advocates are pushing for restorative justice. Restorative justice is a system that focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community. Restorative justice can begin with addressing and transforming the culture of a school. We asked Dr. Mahdi to explain how restorative justice practices impact students.
It recognizes that culture plays such a huge piece in helping young people to develop the social skills, to deal with conflict, and to deal with harm. And that's a life skill.
The Youth Aid Panel Diversion Program at the District Attorney's Office was established in 1987 to address minor offenses committed by young people under 18. We spoke to Program Coordinator Faith Harris to learn more about the program.
Our juveniles that go through the program don't have to go to court. They do not have to see a judge. They can also get their records expunged when they finish the program. And so there's a lot of benefits for the young person to go through the program. For our community, that means that we are partnering very closely with the community to address the needs of the juveniles as well as juvenile delinquency. And we are making sure that our victims are made whole as well. And so our victims will work with our victim service coordinator, and they will be able to do a statement. They'll be able to come to a hearing. They'll be able to even receive restitution once the process is finished. To date, we've diverted about 21,000 cases. And so that means that there are less cases going onto the court docket, and we are allowing our assistant district attorneys to handle more serious cases. And also we're saving taxpayers a lot of money because we're not using court time or resources. So overall, there's so many different impacts to this program, and that's why it's a great example of how we're using the program to exhibit balanced and restorative justice practices.
While students, school officials, and community partners push for more restorative justice opportunities, the Philadelphia School Board recently passed Proposal 805, which requires all Philly high schools to have school police, metal detectors, and x-ray machines. Young people at the Philadelphia Student Union have challenged this.
How long is this false sense of safety going to outweigh the harm that metal detectors do to our school environments and our psyche?
We're an organization that's committed to supporting young folks, primarily in public schools throughout Philadelphia, who really want to focus on, how do we change the school system, but also want to be able to build power amongst students, right? And we do that just because oftentimes, students are not asked, right, about what they want their educational experience to be. Oftentimes they're the ones who are most targeted by a lot of the zero tolerance policies that push them out, right? But we believe that students and parents need to be partners, right, in really shaping the schools and the entire system, right? And because we understand that the way education is planned is currently in this society, that students are often looked at as ones that need to be controlled rather than really supported.
So if students get into a fight, how do we have a strong enough school environment where a teacher or another student can step in and not just say, oh, that's not my problem, I don't want to get involved?
If they don't have a teacher that's able to provide space for them inside the school, we always try to let them know that we have an office, right? We do programming there every day and sometimes on the weekends that allow them to learn everything from, public speaking to how do you actually run a meeting, right? How do you shape demands around what is it that you feel you want to be in your school? And then what are the different ways that you can create campaigns to work with other students, parents and teachers and other allies to be able to get that.
Every direction we're being attacked, and it won't stop until all of us as human beings, not black people, not white people, all of us as human beings stand up for each other and demand change. But also, we need to figure out how to take care of ourselves.
There's a lot more work that needs to be done in order to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline, but change is possible.
In order for us to make the real change that we need to make as a community, we have to educate young people, and we want them to understand that they have power to change what's going on in their communities. You need to educate yourself. You need to learn the history of our people here. You need to learn the history of America. You can go to your elected officials. You can show people how this is directly impacting our schools. You can cry out for more funding. You can cry out for change.